Okay, what I wanted to do this morning, with your permission, is to go through the deeper Kabbalistic significance of the seven species of Israel. So we know that today is Tu B'Shvat, and apart from being, a very beautiful festival and a celebration and a time of hope and festivity, there is great spiritual depth found within the festival of Tu B'Shvat, and a lot of Kabbalistic secrets found within its celebration. What we're going to do is go directly into the seven species and try and understand what they teach us about ourselves and how we can become more connected spiritual beings. So, the essence of Tu B'Shvat, to understand in a deep way, brought down by Rav Chaim Vital, who is the student of the Arizal, is there to essentially rectify the sin of Adam, who ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now we understand that the tree of knowledge of good and evil is the archetypal state of unconsciousness, which we discussed so much, which is the ego. That is the state of unconsciousness that is brought in through the egoic force. And that is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, as opposed to the tree of life, the Eitz HaChaim, which is a reference to the essence of the self, to the connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now we know that man is referred to, Adam ki eitz hasadeh, man is referred to as the tree of the field. And we understand that just like a tree has a root system and needs certain satiation from the ground and from water and from sunlight, same too, we as spiritual beings have a root system which is pointed upwards and gleans from the spiritual nutrients of the upper worlds and our deeper essence. And we're here to create fruit in this world. And the fruit that we're going to be discussing are specifically the seven species of Israel. Now, the species are referred to in Parashas Devarim, in the 8th chapter, in Pasuk Ches, in the 8th verse. And this is what it says. Eretz chita usoira, the Geffen uteina, the rimon eretz zeis shemen udvash. It refers to the seven species in the following way, that it's a land of wheat and barley, of grapes and of figs, pomegranates, as well as olives, or the shemen that comes from olives, which is the olive oil, or dvash, and honey, which is honey specifically from the date plant. Okay, so, or fruit. So these are the seven species. Now, according to Kabbalah, these seven species we know pertain to the seven spheres, or the seven Kabbalistic spheres within us. And those seven spheres pertain to the different emotional energies that are found within ourselves. Now, these emotions can be ripe and can be nutritious, or they can be undeveloped and raw and sour. And what we're going to do is go through these seven species to reveal these seven different emotions and how to clarify if they've been calibrated towards their nutritious selves and sourced in holiness, or if they are raw and undeveloped. Okay, so let's start off, and we're going to go through the order as the Arizal says within these seven species, and we will try and develop what each of these species represents. Okay, so the first one we know is chita. Chita is wheat, and according to the Mekubalim, according to the Kabbalists, wheat represents the attribute of chesed. It represents the attribute of connection and kindness and deeper states of love. And what we understand is this is the energy of wheat, and that energy of love is an energy which we see expressed in what we create with wheat. So now one uses wheat generally to create bread or those types of products that create a state of nourishment, as what we refer to as mazoinus or as lechem. And these are primarily consumed when they are fresh and they are new. And this is also the experience that a person feels through the energy of chesed, through the energy of love. There's a newness, there's an excitement, there's a connection. And we have to consider in our own lives, where do we experience that newness, that love, and that joy, that state of exuberance? And we have to also understand that the word chita also represents the word chet. Chet means to sin. Now, if we consider, most of sin stems from that desire to have something new, something fresh, something connected, something with exuberance. And we have to calibrate our wheat, our chita, our chesed, our desire for love and connection in the positive, towards the connection of mitzvahs and Hashem and our deeper spiritual essence. And that is what wheat represents. Barley, on the other hand, so'ira, represents what we refer to as yira. Yira, or gvura, is a state of restraint. Now, it's unique to understand that barley is given to a soita, to drink. So when a soita is suspected of adultery, she is given a drink made from barley, and that is what somewhat creates or catalyzes the punishment potentially for her adultery and for the adulterer as well. So we see that barley is associated with gvura, with a state of constriction or restraint or discipline. Now, we also know that barley has the danger of soaking up water. Okay, barley, if you put it into your cholent or whatever it does, it soaks up water in a very, very significant way. Now, we know water also represents chesed. Water represents that flow, that growth, that excitement. And barley, when a person has too much yira, too much restraint, too much boundary, which is very important to have in life. A person needs restraint and boundary to not end up being like a soita, not end up committing these forms of adultery, God forbid, or any other forms of lack of boundary. We have to be careful that it doesn't soak up all the water, all of the chesed, all of the wheat. We have to be careful that there's a balance. We also know that barley has a strong hull, which represents that state of boundary, okay? So what we've understood so far is that the wheat, the first species in Israel, out of the 7 species, represents chesed, feeling connected, feeling excited in life, feeling an exuberance for life itself and for the spiritual world that we exist in, and the opportunity to tap into that spiritual world. Then barley represents the ability to have restraint, have boundaries, have discipline. But we have to be cautious that that boundary and that discipline doesn't snuff out the ability to feel that freshness and that connection and that excitement. Okay, those are the first 2. Then we go to Geffen. So Geffen is the reference to grapes. Now, grapes is this Kabbalistic sphere called Tiferes. Tiferes represents beauty, but beauty specifically through balance, where balance is struck between wheat and barley through chesed, connection, and boundary. And this is a very important element which we see expressed through grapes. We know that grapes are the fundamental ingredient for wine. And now wine, we know, is very, very unique and very important within Judaism, where we know that there are the deepest states of spiritual expression are generally associated with Kiddush and with wine. Marriage, Shabbos, Bris Milah, etc., all has wine involved in the process. Now, wine, again, represents the deeper soy, deeper essence. There is the element called nichnas yayin yoitze soy. The Gemara tells us that if a person drinks wine, the depths of them come out. Now, we also know that wine gets better with time, with maturity. Now, what we have to realize is the following. This energy of wine and grapes represents something called beauty. And it's our obsession and love and connection to beauty in this world. We love to see balance. We love to see balance. Now, beauty can be undeveloped, and this emotion for beauty can be undeveloped and raw when a person becomes obsessed with their own egoic beauty, where they become somewhat kidnapped by their tiferes, and it takes them into a place of self-absorption and self-obsession, be it through the obsession of one's own appearance, and not only one's own appearance within the physical realm, but their appearance within the metaphysical, or within the appearance of how people view them and how they are perceived in the public eye. This is an obsession with an unripe state called boiser. Boiser is unripe grapes, small grapes, and it's very dangerous to consume unripe grapes. And the Kabbalah tells us that a person's memory can be affected if they consume unripe grapes. Now, we also have to know that when a person drinks wine, they can get drunk. And this is the reference to a person being cautious not to get drunk on one's own beauty and get drunk through a self-absorption and a self-obsession. So now with wine, where we are able to calibrate it to the positive is the following. The Maharal brings that why do we make Kiddush on wine? Why don't we make it on other forms of alcoholic beverage? So he explains that when you make wine, you take the essence of the grape, you take the insides of the grape, the juice, and you crush the externality to reveal the juice that's internal. Through that, we have the process of wine being created, and that's what we make Kiddush on, to represent the deeper essence, the deeper tiferes, the deeper beauty that's found within the self, and that's found external to the self through the internality of those externalities. What do I mean by that? So a person can be attracted to beauty in other people, but we know that there are different elements of beauty. There's the external beauty, and then there's the internal beauty. And what the wine is there to represent is the sanctity of the internal beauty that is found through Shabbos, that is found through marriage, that is found through a bris, where we remove the externality called the orla and reveal the internality. And that is what we are meant to be doing when we're calibrating our tiferes, to find our inner juice, our inner beauty, to be somewhat elevated through the consumption of that internality. Okay, that's the grapes. But we have to be careful not to get too drunk on it and not to lose ourselves to the external beauty of this world, and especially of ourselves. Okay, now we are on to the next species, which is the fig, the te'ena. Now, the figs represent the energy of netzach. Netzach represents the emotion and the strength, the spiritual strength, to strive and to be eternal, which means that you have the ability to confront and overcome in life, that you have the drive and the aspiration to achieve, okay? And this represents, or is represented in the fig, all right? Now, the uniqueness of a fig is that its fruit is on the inside. And what we have to also represent or understand in terms of its representation, and then apply to the calibration of our own netzach, to allow it to come to a state of fruition and fullness and ripeness, is the following: that the fruit is on the inside, and our striving and our eternality and our ability to overcome needs to be from the perspective and through the direction of our internality. A person can be striving to overcome challenges and overcome boundaries and be able to persevere, but for the wrong reasons, because they want to be represented, they want to look successful, they want to be a made individual. Now that's the uncalibrated netzach. That's the raw, unripe netzach. We want a nice, beautiful fig. We want that fig that you open up and it's just so beautiful and ripe. And this, we understand, is when a person strives from the internal. So another representation of tapping into netzach is when you exercise, okay? To overcome that boundary, all right, is spiritual. There's a spiritual experience in overcoming that boundary when you feel like, gosh, I need to stop now. I don't want to exercise. I don't want to do this. No, I'm going to persevere. Or within whatever boundaries you experience. That's just the basic one. Now, you can be overcoming that boundary and exercising in terms of how do you appear to other people? Do you appear to be a person with perseverance, a strong person, a person that is, able to really, really do well? You see these people with this app, Strava, I think it's called, that shows them how they run, and they publicize how many kilometers they've run and how fast they've done, and it's become an obsession for some people. Someone told me that they know people that won't speak to other people because of how well they've achieved on this app. They get angry when someone does better than themselves. And that's the danger within Netzach, when a person is striving, but not for the right reasons, not for the internality of the self, not to connect to Hashem through overcoming the boundary of the self. Now, it's unique that we know that Adam and Eve made clothes out of the fig leaves, okay? And that is the representation to be betzina, to be a person that's modest, to be a person that doesn't flaunt their ability to overcome boundary. And that is the element of Netzach. It's also brought down in Kabbalah, the reference to it being the longest fruit to blossom. Okay, so the ability to stay on the tree and blossom, despite all difficulties, is the calibration of Netzach. Okay, so at the moment, we've calibrated our chesed, our ability to connect, our ability to be excited. Then we've calibrated our Bali, which is our ability to have restraint and our ability to have boundaries and not go all over the place, to be disciplined. Then we've understood to be careful that doesn't become something that sucks up all the water, the excitement and the flow of life. Then we spoke about our grapes, which is our tiferes, and we understood that to calibrate that is the internality of the self, the beauty of the self, but through the internality, the beauty of becoming intoxicated in a healthy way of the spirituality of the self, the internality, and not becoming drunk on one's external beauty. Then we spoke about figs, which we just spoke about now, which is the ability to strive, but strive from an internal fruit, strive from an internal blossom. Then, to conclude, we have the final three species, which are pomegranates, olives, and dates. So now pomegranates represent the energy of Hoid. Hoid is our humility. Hoid is the ability to have that state of complete malchus, of being able to understand that Hashem is the king, and we are there to just totally dissolve ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and what Hashem wants. But in so doing, we are able to tap into the Hoid, the splendor of life. We're able to then, instead of worrying all the time, we're able to sort of sit back and say, wow, look how beautiful, look how grateful I am for life, through that state of humility. Now, the danger with Hoid is that a person can enter into a state of feeling too low about themselves, too forlorn, too lacking in terms of their confidence, too much separate from other people. And pomegranates teach us how to humble ourselves in the correct way, where if you open up a pomegranate, all the seeds are connected. They're all next to each other. It seems like there's a party going inside of that pomegranate, where there's just a state of connection and joy and oneness. And there's a beauty in that. And we have to understand that our humility shouldn't lead us to feel distant from people and to be scared of people. We need to feel a state of connection and oneness to all of humanity. And that's the calibration of Hoid. Olives are unique, again, as all of these species are. And that represents our Yisoid. Okay, Yisoid, we know, is the balance of Netzach and Hoid, the balance of striving and of being humble. And what's unique about olives is it takes, according to Kabbalah, the fire of Netzach and the water of humility, this fire of striving and the water of humility, and combines them. And you'll see that that's exactly what an olive is. Unlike any other fruit here, olives have the ability to produce fire through their liquid, which is very unique, that you are able to create a flame from putting a wick into oil. That's unlike any of these other species here. And that is because there is a combination of fire and liquid within the olive, where there's a combination of Hoid and Netzach. Now, what Hoid and Netzach allow us to do is to connect to people. So now, if you think about it, the ability to connect to someone is our ability to have, to persevere beyond our boundaries. And that's our Netzach. Okay, we often feel maybe sometimes a little bit scared to connect. And that's our boundary, and Netzach allows us to go beyond. But if you don't have the humility and the Hoid, sometimes you seem overly excited and overly too close, those people that stand way too close to you when they talk. Not that that's ever going to happen again with our fears of the pandemic, but we have that concept of humility here with Hoid. There's a boundary, and person knows what is the level to engage, and that's what allows us to connect in Yisoid to people. Now, the unique element of olives is also the following. Yisoid, also unlike any of these other species, in order to be consumed, needs to be pickled. Okay, you can't have an olive without being pickled. It is very sour. In fact, I think the Bedouins use it as an anesthetic. If they get their teeth pulled out, they chew on a raw olive. That's how dangerous it is. So what is so special about olives that they need to be pickled? So our Yisoid is also our ability to connect to the spirituality in the physical world. Okay, it's our deep need to connect to the physical in this world. Now, it could be through the consumption of food. It could be through intimacy. And those frameworks of experience can be very dangerous. We know that most sin, in fact, could be associated with the state of Yisoid, with the olive, where a person is consuming or connecting in the improper way of doing so. Now, what we need to do is calibrate our Yisoid, calibrate the olive, to reveal the light, to reveal the fire, to reveal the deeper secret. And that's also what Yisoid means. The Soid is the secret. And what we're meant to do through our connecting in this world is to reveal the beauty of this world, but not in a physical way, in a spiritual way. So when we look at something in this world, let's say it's a pleasurable activity, such as eating food or having a shower, or even intimacy, or even the state of deeply connecting through a relationship. Those places of connection, which represent Yisoid, or Yisoid is the energy there, the emotion, instead of connecting from the external place, try and see if you can find the godliness, the fire, reveal the fire, the illumination of that experience. And that is what is represented in the olive. It's unique that we use the olive on Chanukah, the olive oil, to illuminate into the marketplace, to find Hashem in the physicality, to connect deeper in the marketplace. And finally, we have dates, which is the dvash, which is the malchus, which is our ability to do, our actuality, the flow of all of the above. Now, it represents action in this world. Now, our actions can be very much like honey, okay? Honey gives us an experience of sweetness, but too much honey is dangerous. It's too overly sweet and it doesn't taste good or feel good if you've overconsumed honey. Same too, within this world, within the physicality of this world, it's okay to have a bit of honey. It's okay to have a bit of sweetness and enjoy the sweetness of the physicality and of action. But having too much is too dangerous. The type of action that we have to engage with in this world is exactly like the date tree, which we are told, tzaddik katamar yifrach, that we need to be like the palm tree. And the Kabbalists bring that the palm tree is something that creates shade. And the shade is something that is there to protect and create a state of beauty and feeling of comfort for others. And that's the focal point when it comes to our own activity in this world, which the dates represent the state of malchus. It's the actuality, it's the doing, it's the experience of this world through action, the emotion of this world through action. Now, the emotion that we experience through action is like honey again. Where do we find sweetness in our life? Do we find it in the self-absorbed activity or through the shade-producing activity, that we are there to shelter the other? To be like a tzaddik katama yifrach, a sprouting palm tree. And if you think about it, to conclude, this is the question we need to ask ourselves when it comes to honey. Honey, according to halacha, is able to totally destroy something if placed in it. If you leave something in honey, if it is not whole, it will be destroyed. If it is whole, it will be preserved. And we have to ask ourselves the same when it comes to our own activity in this world. Is our activity wholesome? Is it there to provide shade? If so, it will be preserved and it will give us longevity and is healthy for us. If not, it is something that will destroy. And that activity, when it's self-absorbed, is something that can provide a dangerous experience in this world, an unsatiating experience in this world. And thus, my friends, we have the 7 species, and we understand that we don't immediately see any form of results when it comes to these species. And that's why we celebrate Tu B'Shvat at a time where there is no fruit on the trees, at a time when the trees are not in blossom. And the reason why we celebrate that is to understand that all of this is a journey. All of our experience in creating this fruit, which we'll very quickly go over just for your recollection, including my recollection, is there as a journey. And even if you've just experienced this and you can't remember everything we've spoken about it, at least it's there. At least you've taken the first step on the journey, okay? And that's why we celebrate the trees when they're not in full blossom. So very quickly, we have our energy of connection, which is our wheat, and having a freshness and having an exuberance for life. Then we have our ability within the barley to have restraint and to not be too lackadaisical and not be able to have that discipline. Then we have the energy of our inner beauty and connecting to that inner beauty, the yasoid, not the yasoid really of what we spoke about when it comes to olives. It's a little bit confusing, but the depth of the grape, the depth of yourself, the spiritual depth, the essence of who you are. Then we had the figs, which was the ability to strive in life and have that energy of being able to persevere throughout boundaries and through the things that hold us or seemingly hold us back in life, to be eternal, but to be eternal in an internal way, which the fig represents. Then we had the humility of the self found in the pomegranate, but being careful that it doesn't create a distance from other people, but it actually allows us to connect to other people and see that we are essentially the same. There's nothing that really prevents us from connecting or creates a boundary between other people. We are just somewhat very much democratized in ourselves and able to connect. Then we had that energy of the olive, which was the ability to reveal the fire within life through our deeper connection to the physical, to illuminate the spiritual within the physical and connect to our pleasure sense, to the pleasure when you're having a shower and you're feeling that warm water. Realize that's Hashem. There's a beautiful spiritual fire in that. When you're eating something delicious, realize there's Hashem in that. When you're connecting deeply to someone, realize you're connecting to the essence of godliness within them. That's the greatest state of joy. And that's why it needs to be pickled. And then finally, we have the ability to represent or experience our action in this world in a way that creates shade and is able to preserve and is able to be sweet, but not too sweet. We're not to have too much honey, but to have that sweetness from the date through the state of shade that it creates for others. And that's our actions in this world needs to be not self-serving, but there to create that shade and protection for all of existence. So a Tu B'Shvat Sameach to everyone, sending you lots of love and brocha. We have a few minutes if anyone wants any clarification or questions.
I didn't understand the pickle aspect of the olive.
So the olive needs to be, you have to be very cautious when it comes to your connection in this world, to the physicality. You know, when you're engaging with physical things, you can easily forget that there's spirituality behind it, and then you just become totally absorbed in the physicality of it. And the pickling, we know, it says in the Torah that Hashem created the Yetzer Hara, and he created the Torah as a tavlen. He created the Torah as a pickling force. And same too, in order to be able to reveal the godliness within our physicality, in order to be able to connect or have a nexus between the upper worlds and the lower worlds, to find the upper worlds in the lower worlds, you need Torah. You need Torah to illuminate your eyes, to be able to see Hashem, to be able to see the essence of the experience within all of the physical things of this world as well. And that's why I need a pickling force of the olives. Yes?
Rabbi, I came here slightly late. Sorry about that. Did you say anything by any chance on the significance of the number 7 of the species?
Well, the 7
Why 7?
The 7 represents the 7 species. You know, it represents the 7.
Why not 8, Rabbi?
Because 8 is the number beyond. You know, there are specifically 7. There are specifically 7 emotional energies within us called the Zer Anpin, and these are the states of. You know, we can go much deeper into it in representing Hashem's name. This is the metaphysics of how Hashem created us. You know, what the significance of 7 is it represents these 7 emotions. Why did Hashem create us with these 7 emotions? I'm not sure. You have to ask Hashem.
I was just thinking to myself, anything to do with the 7 days of the week,
100%.
7 days of creation.
Definitely. There's so much.
7 days of creation.
Yeah, definitely.
7 days of walking around the bra, around the groomer, under the chuppah, all those other 7s.
Yes.
Any
there are a lot of
correlation?
7s. We could sit here, literally. You know, Rabbi Shippo has a very, very, very good shiur where he goes through all the representations of 7, and I think it takes about an hour or 2. Okay, so
sure,
we can definitely sit here and compare all the 7s. There's a lot of 7s, but 100%, this is the element of 7, to reveal and calibrate the 7 different emotions and connect them to their source, the root source, which is the spiritual self. Yeah. As opposed to what we said initially, which you didn't hear, is the Eitz Das or the Eitz Chaim. Are we trying to connect to the ego through the tree, through the Eitz Das Tovara, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is the knowledge of good and evil within ourselves of the ego, or the Eitz Chaim, the deeper essence? And do we allow our trees and our fruits to glean nutrition from that essence? Yeah, and that's the discussion here, or exploration.
Thank you, Rabbi. Just to finish, I'm suggesting it's not coincidence, it's number 7. It's 7 for a reason.
Definitely, 7 for a reason.
Yeah,
no coincidence.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, my friends, thank you. Have a great one. Try and see if you can get some of the 7 species to have these intentions when you eat them and use them as a form of calibration. But wishing you all lots of brocha and happiness and joy. Bye.
You too. Thank you.